Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Joe. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful Monday so far. It's a brand new week, which means a brand new beginning, more opportunities to create the life you want to live. So remember to spread kindness this week and make the most of it. I have lots of awesome stories to share with you today. I'm super excited about today's episode. They all just, they're kind of fun and they're kind of interesting. So I'm excited to share them. So let's just jump right into it. So the first one I'm going to start with is a positive one about COVID-19. I just feel like starting off with a positive thing about the pandemic is a good way to start the episode. All right, so this one, there has been a possible breakthrough of a treatment. So it's an aerosol-based protein inhalant, and it's been shown in trials to reduce the risk of death from COVID-19 and reduce the chance of developing serious symptoms by 79%, and that's compared to the patients that were given a placebo. So the results are shown that patients were more than twice as likely to make a full recovery from COVID-19, and that's meaning that they had no lasting respiratory weaknesses or other damages. So it's a new drug. It's called SNG-001, and it's an inhalant, and it's a naturally occurring protein called interferon beta. And basically, it was conducted at the University of Southampton, and it was co-founded by 3 of the university's professors, and they tested the treatment on 100 hospitalized COVID-19 patients. So 120 of them were at home, and it was just a randomized controlled trial, and it was spanning a period from about March to May. So when inhaled directly into the lungs, this protein activates a powerful immune response. It's actually a prime protein candidate for treatment testing because COVID-19 suppresses the body's natural production of interferon beta, which helps from the inherent protection against the spreading virus in the body. So one of the professors says, "We are all delighted with the trial results announced, which shown that SNG-001 greatly reduced the number of hospitalized COVID-19 patients who were progressed from requiring oxygen to requiring ventilation. It also showed that patients who received the drug were at least twice as likely to recover to the point where their everyday activities were not compromised through having been infected by COVID-19, and the assessment of the drug in COVID-19 patients could signal a major breakthrough in the treatment of hospitalized COVID-19 patients." Professor Stephen Holgate, he said that he's describing it as a huge potential for restoring the natural immune system response in a patient's lungs. He also added that the drug does help the lungs combat COVID-19, and it could become a more important treatment than any future vaccines, which may have to be re-engineered as the virus mutates in the future. So they say recognizing that COVID-19 is known to have evolved to evade the initial antiviral response of the lung or inhaled treatment of giving high local concentrations of the interferon beta, and it restores the lung's ability to neutralize the virus or any mutation of the virus or co-infection with another respiratory virus such as like influenza or RSV. So the phase 2 trial was relatively small, and the results have not been peer reviewed for error or bias, but the company would require regulatory approval from the drug for it can be commercially marketed, but it is approved. The treatment could revolutionize the way viral respiratory infections such as MERS, SARS, and COVID-19 are treated. They say our efforts are now focused on working with the regulators and other key groups to progress the potential COVID-19 treatment as rapidly as possible. So there you have it, a positive thing about COVID-19. Love to hear all these little breakthroughs of treatments and potential vaccines and all these good things happening. Now, this next story I want to share with you is pretty interesting. This TV reporter, she's from Florida, and she is thanking a total stranger who basically saved her life because this viewer spotted a lump on her neck. So, yeah, she's super thankful to this total stranger. She sent an email because she noticed this lump on the neck. So the television viewer basically encouraged her to see a doctor. And her name is Victoria Price, and she took the advice, and she's very glad that she did take the advice. She says, as a journalist, it's been full throttle since the pandemic began. Never-ending shifts and a never-ending news cycle. We were covering the most important health story in century, but my own health was the farthest thing from my mind. She's only 28 years old. She works with WFLA-TV in Tampa. And she just got this email from a viewer. It was back on June 4th. And she did find that lump on her own neck, though it was kind of barely perceptible. But it was indeed thyroid cancer, and she will undergo a surgery on this coming Monday here to remove the tumor, thyroid, and a couple other nearby lymph nodes. She says, we're hopeful this will be my first and last procedure. Had I never received the email, I never would have called my doctor. The cancer would have continued to spread. So the broadcaster, she quipped that station's motto, 8 on your side, and has become more than a catchphrase. She says, I found my viewer on my side, and I couldn't be more grateful. She had zero obligation to, but she did anyways. Talk about being on your side, huh? The world is a tough place these days. Don't forget to take care of yourself, take care of each other. So that's what she wrote. She posted this on social media. If you want to go check that out, you can go look at her Instagram page, Victoria Price TV, and you can hear a little bit more of the story. There's also a video up on YouTube, just NBC News, Florida reporter that was diagnosed with cancer after the viewer spotted the lump. Talk about lucky. That is just it's so cool that someone was just sitting there watching and noticed something like that. It's just crazy. All right, now my next story is pretty cool. So the Aspiration debit card has helped customers finance 1 million trees planted and get cash back. Isn't that cool? So they're this company now, so they're helping to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, as easy as paying the extra 1 cent on top of your $2.99 cup of coffee. You can help remove CO2 from the atmosphere. So just in April, the economic and social portions, of course, of COVID-19 became very clear, and the eco-conscious American bank called Aspiration, they launched a program to see if customers would be willing to contribute a small something to fund a mass tree planting. So now, 3 months later, the response that they got was just absolutely amazing. And even though some of Aspiration's customers did lose their jobs during the pandemic or came, just temporarily jobless for a while due to the lockdowns, their rounding up of various purchases funded the planting of 1 million carbon capturing trees. So yeah, literally just like if you had a $2.99 coffee, you round up to the $3, and that's going to go towards, or that did go towards planting some trees, which is pretty cool. So using an Aspiration debit card comes with a feature. It's called Plant Your Change. That's what it's called. And it rounds up every purchase to the nearest dollar, with the extra few cents going to Aspiration's tree planting operations. And it spans the globe from North America to Africa. So the idea was based on this widely publicized theory of climate mitigation that said our planet had experienced a lot of deforestation since the advent of the industrial age, and that returning some of those billions of acres back into the forest would draw a significant amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere. So they say planting 1 million trees is a big achievement, but it is just the beginning. We've seen what we've seen during COVID-19 crisis is that our customers want to do more, not less, to take action to save our planet. So this bank, it is a B corporation, have adopted social good as its top priority. It's also paying customers up to 10% cash back for doing business with the most eco-friendly companies as well. So Aspiration wants its customers to be able to actively see the costs of the modern global economy in terms of carbon as well as currency. And they offer about 1% APY on savings, which is far above the industry standard. Their accounts also come with features like Aspiration Impact Measurement, so AIM. And AIM allows cardholders to accumulate a personal sustainability score and to see and examine these scores of various businesses before they actually start making purchasing decisions. So far, Aspiration has used their AIM to score thousands of merchants and businesses on how they treat the planet and the operations. The more often one uses their Aspiration card, the more they'll be able to see the impact of their spending, and you can track it over time and you can compare it with your friends. How cool is that? You just got to spend your money and you're doing well for the environment. So purchases at many of the businesses and brands with the highest of these scores come with about 10% cashback bonus for responsible shopping. So Aspiration just reminds that throughout the history, from the Montgomery bus boycott to the conflict diamond trade, consumer spending decisions wield tremendous power when consumers are resolved, and studies demonstrate that more and more people are making consumer decisions based on things like ethics towards the land, ethics towards the climate, and ethics towards people. And then another feature of this card is the planet protection, which when it's activated, it calculates the cost of carbon offsets when you use your Aspiration debit card at a pump. And transportation is the world's largest producer of CO2, and plant protection allows you to ensure that the carbon offsets being funded to cover the environmental cost of your driving. So head out and get an Aspiration debit card if you want to be spending your money and helping out planting some trees and just helping the environment. You can track all of your spending and how it's affecting the environment. All right, it's time for a little bit of a break, but don't go anywhere. I got so many cool stories to share with you, including one later on that will come. It's another COVID-19 story, but it's a pretty cool one about a man who sailed solo across the Atlantic. You're not going to want to miss this. It's pretty interesting, so stay tuned. I'll be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Joe. Hello, we are back. I got more fun stories to share with you. And I have this little survey that I wanted to share with you. It says that more Americans are going out of their way to support small businesses during COVID-19. So 7 in 10 Americans have experienced a huge wake-up call during COVID-19 pandemic, and they've just shifted their purchases away from bigger corporations and decided to shop small. And this is just a new poll of U.S. adults where this came from. So it's a survey about 2,000 Americans about how they've responded to the coronavirus impact on their local communities and whether they're supporting small businesses in this difficult time. So 71% of those surveyed said they are now shifting their shopping habits to supporting local businesses rather than those big corporations or chain stores. And And the survey found that 79% of the respondents said that COVID-19 pandemic has changed their perspective on just how important small businesses are to their communities. During their months, sheltering in a place, the respondents also shared that they've supported an average of 10 small businesses within the pandemic span so far. 43% of the respondents said that the top method they've been supporting their local businesses is by ordering takeout or delivery. Over half of those surveyed also said they're tipping their delivery drivers more than they normally would, about up to 28% of their bill, which is quite a big number actually. So another 4 in 10 respondents said they've shown support by visiting their websites and ordering online. 38% said they've been donating money to small businesses. 3 in 10 respondents are also writing online reviews and sharing their local businesses' social media posts to support them during this time. There's so many different ways you can support small business. Literally just sharing something to your Instagram story can make a big difference for a small business. So they say that despite their individual support, about 74% of those polled were worried that their favorite local spot may not financially survive the pandemic. And perhaps because of this worry, about 77% of the respondents said they plan on supporting more local businesses once they return to normal after the pandemic. So 58% of those surveys said the top businesses they can't wait to visit again after the pandemic were their local coffee shop. And more than half just want to book a reservation at their favorite restaurant. And 31% said they can't wait to sit down and have a drink at their local bar. I wonder what you are waiting to do after this pandemic. What is your number one thing that you want to go do when things start to really go back to normal? Message me on social media. Let me know what you want to do after this pandemic. I'm curious because I was reading this survey, and for me, I think it's going to some local restaurants that I miss going to and those kind of things. But I'm curious what you want to do. So don't forget to head over to our social media and talk to me. I would love to engage with you about your plans after all this craziness is over. Now, let's get back to the environment train. So there was, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's called the Beyond Plastic Awards. And it's basically for innovative packaging. So this, the winners of the 2020 Beyond Plastic Awards, they looked for new designs to eliminate single-use plastic packaging, in their society, and they brought innovative and elegant solutions to make the common consumer items biodegradable and CO2 free. So this contest is launched by inventor and entrepreneur, and he is the founder of BeyondPlastic.net. His name is Yul Rich, and he features 4 categories with gold, silver, and bronze winners in each one. He says the award is directed towards students, designers, engineers, makers, creators, inventors, artists, everyone who has an idea, concept, prototype, or even a solution already in the market, which supports a less single-use plastic is welcome to take part. So taking the gold winners of this one was the most innovative solution, and it was a bag that dissolves in boiling water. His name is Jack Clearly, and the waste-based team from United Kingdom call it the Item Bag 2.0, and it belongs in every dry cleaning store in the world now, they're saying. So they said that their goal is to replace some of these plastic bags that are used to transport basically anything from clothing items to whatever else on the planet, and they want to replace that with bags that will biodegrade after they're discarded. So the Item Bag 2.0, it basically dissolves in both salt water and hot water, and it's leaving behind nothing but bio-ink and some non-toxic minerals, which can be poured down the drain, which is pretty cool. It's also carbon negative as opposed to carbon neutral, so that's meaning that the production process of the Item Bag 2.0 removes more carbon from the air than it adds. So 100% more, actually, which is pretty incredible. If you want to go see this in action, head over to their Instagram page. It's called Waste Based Co. And you can literally see this bag dissolve in boiling water. It's pretty interesting. So Waterbase also makes compostable e-commerce mail envelopes. And they are 100% waterproof, but they degrade in nature after about 6 months. The green company also plants trees to offset any carbon cost of operations, which they can't make sustainable. And they've planted almost 1,000 trees in Ireland, Scotland, Romania, and Madagascar. So the Brazilian team took silver in the category, and the silver category calls most practical impact, and that's for their effort to reduce plastics in the classic toothpaste tube, which cannot be reused at all. So it's an indispensable and daily use item for all of us, of course, right? The plastic toothpaste tube received this eco-friendly makeover in the workshops of Cool Paste is called. So Cool Paste is an academic project that was developed in 2012 by Alan Gomes, and he found that there were no decrease in salability if the cardboard box surrounding the toothpaste tube were removed entirely. So the tubes become the entire package. It's literally this, like your toothpaste is this material so basically it's made of like durable cardboard material, so it's sustainable. It's also biodegradable though, and it hangs on store shelves, and just eliminates the paper and chemical inks that are required to manufacture the boxes as well. So the sustainability extends even to the cap, and that's made from bioesters that's derived from things like cornstarch, tapioca roots, and sugarcane. So pretty interesting, I have to say. So that is the Beyond Plastic Awards. That was gold and silver, the two winners of them. I've never heard of these awards before, but they actually do pay their finalists and just give them kind of some, some notice, some awareness, and get their product out there. So if you want to go find out some more about Beyond Plastic Award, head over to their website. You can see the other winners and the other people that kind of sent things in, trying to get into it. But Beyond Plastic Awards, pretty cool. All right, now my next story for you. So a unanimous Senate votes to protect the sea turtles and the dolphins from drift nets in the last spot that allows them right now. So sea turtles, whales, and dolphins are soon going to be free of the deadly possibility that they will get entangled in the huge drift nets that are floating off the coast of California. So the U.S. Senate on Wednesday unanimously passed a bipartisan bill to phase out the use of these harmful mesh gill nets to federal waters out there. And the only place that the nets are still used is in the United States. So now that bill has been passed. Woohoo! So the mesh drift nets, which are more than a mile long, they're left in the ocean overnight to catch swordfish and thresher sharks and other marine species, including like whales, dolphins, sea lions, sea turtles, fish, sharks. Basically, any of those animals can become entangled in these long, large nets, and they can injure or kill them. So Turtle Island Restoration Network has led a coalition of concerned citizens and partner organizations for over 20 years now, working to stop the devastating impact of the drift net fishery on sea turtles and other ocean animals, and they've had quite a bit of success. So in 2018, California passed a 4-year phase out of the large mesh drift gill nets in state waters, but the new law, which is called the Drift Net Modernization and Bycatch Reduction Act, would extend similar protections to federal waters within 5 years. And it's going to be helping the commercial fishing industry transition to more sustainable gear types. So they say the legislation will ensure no more whales or dolphins fall victim. We are encouraged that the United States is taking steps to address harmful fishing methods and the ocean off of our coasts. So there you have it. I just feel like I'm sharing so many positive things about the environment in today's episode. All right, it is time for another break, but do not go anywhere because when we get back, I still haven't shared that story with you about the man who traveled across the Atlantic Ocean. It's a really interesting story, but it's coming up at the end, so stay tuned. I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast. All right, we are on the last stretch of today's episode. I have a few more stories to share with you. So this next one is about Japan's new invention, which is pretty cool. It's a new bullet train, and it's designed with natural disasters and earthquakes in mind. So it's the Central Japan Railway Company, the JR Central. They've just launched a newly designed high-speed, or what they're calling the bullet train, and it's equipped with special features to better protect passengers from natural disasters. So, of course, Japan, an island nation surrounded by underground fault lines in the Pacific, it's called the Ring of Fire. It's made a history for natural disasters, particularly earthquakes, but also typhoons and flooding, and much of the infrastructure for prevention and recovery is, at this point, baked into the fabric of the society. So JR Central's, it's called N700 Supreme, is the first new train model in 13 years. It is super fast, and it connects to Tokyo and Osaka, and it moves passengers along about 186 miles per hour, and it comes with a variety of accommodating features like power outlets behind the seats, diffused interior lighting, reclining seats, headrests, and better suspension and soundproofing to just provide a quieter, more stable ride. But the best part of this bullet train, it's not just all the luxury, it's not the focus for the passengers, but during an earthquake, the train is equipped with an onboard lithium-ion battery component that will allow it to power itself for enough time to reach the nearest evacuation point along the tracks where the passengers can then disembark. So a ceremony to mark the commute of the first N700S train was held at the Tokyo station just in earlier July, and with JR Central resident Shin Keniko among the participants, and she says the N700S is full of our technological achievements. So off-the-grid battery operations are the important details that form the web of the disaster proofing that exist in Japanese society, and they say it's these kinds of auxiliary systems that allow Japanese International Airport, KIX, to recover quickly after the typhoon Jebi smashed into Osaka Bay in September of 2018, bringing it with 124 miles per hour winds as well. And the waves overtook the seawall and flooded the terminals. I don't know if you remember hearing about this, but the ocean tanker crashed into the bridge connecting the airport to the mainland. But despite all that, the airport did reopen partially in just 2 days, completing the repairs and allowing tens of thousands to arrive and depart from the airport once again, only 17 days after the storm. Pretty incredible. So there you have it. Now they're just getting more innovative and more innovative as time goes on. So Japan's new bullet train. Now, my next story for you is that more than 1 million UK citizens have quit smoking during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was an English campaign, and it was designed to help and encourage people to quit smoking, and it conducted a survey now that has found that more than 1 million people have quit smoking since the outbreak of COVID-19. So this campaign is called Action on Smoking and Health, ASH, and it's reported that about 41% of people in the UK who stopped smoking cigarettes in 2020 said it was a direct result of the pandemic. So it was not confirmed whether this was due partially or primarily to the lack of access to tobacco products because of the lockdowns, or the implementation of social distancing measures, which prevented, social cigarette use, of course, or if it was from the links between smoking and the virus's infection and hospitalization rates. So there's a lot of factors that could play into this, but the most important thing is that more than 1 million UK citizens have quit smoking during this pandemic. So that is always a positive. Now, like I promised from the beginning of the episode, I have this one story about a man who sailed solo across the Atlantic because he wanted to reach his 90-year-old father. How cool is that? So since COVID canceled all of the flights, he decided to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. So as the COVID-19 crisis grew increasingly and all of those restrictions were lifted, his name is Juan Balestero, and he wanted more than anything to be reunited with his elderly parents that were in Argentina in time for his father's upcoming 90th birthday. But of course, he was in Portugal and all the international flights had been canceled. So it's about 5,600 miles and the Atlantic Ocean between him and his family. So he was faced with some, he didn't know what he was going to do. He was faced with a dilemma. He's only 47 years old, but he decided to come up with a solution, and he decided to sail himself home across the Atlantic. So sensing time was of the essence, he feared that the local port would soon begin restricting travel as well. So the urgency of the situation left him with no window to second guess his decision. So within 24 hours, he decided to take a one-way ticket, and there was just absolutely no going back. And he's been right too. By that time, he was ready to embark. The authorities on the tiny Portuguese island of Porto Santo warned him that if he left, he could not return. He said, "I didn't want to stay like a coward on an island where there were no cases. I wanted to do everything possible to return home. The most important thing for me was to be with my family." So a few days later, after provisioning his 29-foot sailboat with that he hoped would be enough rice, fruit, canned tuna, and wine to sustain him over his trip, he made ready to weigh anchor, and he just trusted his fate that it would get him where he needed to go. And he did it. He set sail in mid-March, hoping to make landfall in his home about 75 days later. And so, of course, he says it wasn't without hardships or any danger. His food supply dwindled, and authorities of the Cape Verde, the port where he'd hoped to restock, refused his entry. Then once he was past the equator, he ran out of fuel, and he was basically just left to rely purely on wind power. And then he also wanted to mention that on day 38, he ran out of wine. So then the wind quit, and it left his sailboat sitting in the doldrums for 10 days. During that time, barnacles grew on the hull, which then would create this drag and slow him down. So he was forced to dive under the vessel and scrape them off himself, and that was risking a shark attack from where he was. And with no one aboard to help, he definitely ran into some trouble. So the situation was potentially pretty bad, but he got pretty lucky. The wind eventually picked up again, allowing him to resume his course. He says, as the journey dragged on, his faith was continually challenged, but he never truly panicked. He says, "I wasn't afraid, but I did have a lot of uncertainty. It was very strange to sail in the middle of a pandemic with humanity tearing around me." And then he endured numerous adversities. The voyage also offered him glimpses of Mother Nature's grace as well. For most of the final leg of his crossing, a playful pod of dolphins provided him some company, which is pretty cool. They were racing alongside him. There's some images up on online on his Instagram and stuff. But he did. 85 days passed, and he made it home. Immediately upon entering, he was tested for COVID-19 and he was cleared. He was exhausted, but he was reunited with his father, and it was just in time for Father's Day as well. What a unique story, I thought. Like, traveling all the way across the ocean, all by yourself, 85 days, all the things he went through. Pretty interesting, just to make it home to his father. All right, well, that is all of the feel-good, positive stories that I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening to GSMC, America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Joe. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button. Head over to our social media. Let me know what you're most excited to be doing after the pandemic is all over. Do not forget to like and follow us on there. We got Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, so go chat with me over there. And then, of course, like always, please do not forget to leave a 5-star review because it helps out a ton. All right. Thank you so much again. Remember to stay positive, stay happy, and spread kindness every single chance that you get. Till next time, thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.